sons. Tonight, you have learned the final and greatest truth of the ninja. That ultimate mastery comes not of the body, but of the mind.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's time for another comic book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Last Ronin, number 3, the TMNT. I don't know, it feels like it's more of a Mirage story every time we get another issue. This has been absolutely excellent. This has been probably the most exciting thing IDW has put out in a very long time. Hugely successful. Not a huge fan of the delays. These are double-sized issues, but there are 3 artists working on them as well. Wish that they could get them out at least bi-monthly, but it feels like it's been like 3 or 4 months in between each comic book. But if you're gonna make me wait, as in the case with Doomsday Clock a couple years ago with DC Comics, you better deliver the goods. And TMNT: The Last Ronin continues to do that. Obviously, this is from Kevin Eastman. Tom Waltz, his writing partner. I imagine Waltz is doing a majority of the writing. This is basically taking a story that was created by Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman back in the day when they were still working on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles together. They've repurposed it, and now they turn it in this big kind of sweeping epic, I don't know, The Dark Knight Returns style TMNT book. We've got multiple artists, like I said before earlier, the Escorza brothers, Ben Bishop, and Kevin Eastman himself. Eastman's doing all the layouts. This has been absolutely terrific. This, as far as the 3 issues that have been released go. The first one was bulletproof. That was a 5-star comic. Everything was perfect about it. The second one, I gave it like a 4.5 star. Highly recommend or highest recommendation. It was right in there. That was a really good one as well. This is still highly recommend. It's a 4-star comic for a few reasons. One of the major ones is when you're done reading this comic, as far as the main plot, like the through point, the story that we're reading in modern times, there's mostly characterization added and just the tiniest bit of plot progression. Most of this is filling in the blanks of how we got here. We know that April was missing a leg, missing an arm. She's got a child named Casey Marie, the daughter of her and a now deceased Casey Jones. We also learned the fate of Raphael in the last issue. Here we learn the fate of 2 more of our heroes, certainly hinted at on the cover of this issue. We also learn a little bit more information about the main villain, Hiroto, and kind of where he's at. A little bit of ambiguity there. Obviously, there's some more information we need about him. So that's the main disappointment in there. There's also some characterization that I think if they don't address it in the next few issues could drag this issue down, at least for one of the characters. But I am enjoying this on a very high level. If you're not reading TMNT: The Last Ronin, I think you are missing out. It is expensive. They are releasing 48 pages at a time, and they are $8. It's not like you're getting a discount on that. There aren't a ton of comic books releasing stories that are this exciting and this well executed right now. So if you're missing out, I say go back and grab some of the reprints and catch on up because, well, you have the time. The next issue probably won't be out for 3 or 4 months, but this has absolutely been excellent and worth your time and your money, as far as I'm concerned. Now let's get into the review and all the things that I like about this, because there's not much to dislike, if I'm being completely honest. Once again, we do get 3 different artists. They all show themselves very well. First up, in the here and now, the current time story, that is illustrated by the Escorza brothers. Very bright, vivid, dynamic. Certainly has a cyberpunk kind of Blade Runner feel to it, as New York City has been under the control of Oroku and the Foot Clan for some time now. The second artist doing kind of the flashbacks of the team and what happened to the Turtle family, including not just the brothers Splinter, but Casey Jones, April O'Neil. That story on all the things that happened to get us here, that is being illustrated by Ben Bishop. The colors are much more subdued. The action is definitely dialed up a bit in that one. Finally, we only get 2 pages this week from the original illustrator of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Kevin Eastman, in his definitive Kevin Eastman style. These seem to be selectively used only for when Michelangelo is telling his personal backstory of what happened after the Ben Bishop story is happening. Like in the meantime, let's covering the gap. And this week we also get a page of that explains what happened to April O'Neil as well. Despite there being some differences in artistic style, I think everything blends together well, and they all complement each other. So the art is absolutely fantastic. Lights out on this TMNT, The Last Ronin series. Now let's get into the book, and we'll talk about the backup story kind of that's going on, because that's where we got a lot of actual progression, filling in the blanks of how we got there, and then we'll kind of we'll talk about the characterization that's added to some of the main players in their current timeline story. That's mostly what happened there. Like I said, there wasn't a lot of plot progression. So at the beginning, we see Fugitoid, Professor Honeycutt, one of the big reveals at the end of the Last Ronin #2. As it turns out, he plays a big part as far as the demise of the characters that we lose in this issue. This continues on after we lost Raphael in the flashback from the last issue. So we've got Michelangelo, Leonardo, Donatello, Splinter remaining, obviously Casey Jones, April O'Neil, and some of their compatriots that are supporting them in New York City. And when he sees Fugitoid's head, it kind of brings him back to where they were. This is very interesting. At the very beginning, Oroku, the grandson of Shredder, becomes the head of the clan, and he decides he wants to shut down the war. He no longer wants to have a war with Splinter in his house. He wants to squash it, and that leads to Splinter and Donatello exiting. They decide they're going to Japan to take him up on his offer and have this parlay to discuss terms of peace for a ceasefire as far as the war between the two clans. Unfortunately, when this happens, Baxter Stockman and others see this as a time to strike. Baxter Stockman is determined to get his hands on Fugitoid. He wants him in operating condition. He's been able to locate the turtle's lair using Fugitoid himself and the firewall that he put up to protect them. He used that to kind of track them down. It's hinted at that this might be the Foot Clan, but I'm not so certain that that's what's actually happened here. And one thing that's also interesting, as far as I know, when we get to the end of this, that's the end of the story as far as the backup between Michelangelo and April O'Neil. All the gaps are going to be filled in. We don't see anything happen to Donatello and Splinter. As far as we know, they went to Japan. This certainly leaves open the possibility that they're still alive. Because after this, Michelangelo goes on his way on his quest. He goes out to kind of die and then ends up in Europe and other places training. And after this, April O'Neil, wakes up in a hospital, missing an arm and a leg, and is pregnant and starts her new life. So there's no more backstory as far as this engagement and how they lost the war in New York City. So as far as I can see, Donatello and Splinter could still be alive. They could be hiding out in Japan or somewhere else. But there is a lot more story to tell. Now let's get to this demise. I'm sure you've already figured it out since I said Splinter and Donatello went to Japan. We know that Michelangelo and April O'Neil make it. And we have the defenses of the turtle's lair essentially falling down around them. Baxter Stockman wants Fugitoid, and he's sparing no expenses. He's sending the entire armada after Casey Jones, Michelangelo, Leonardo, April O'Neil. And their mission is to get April and Fugitoid out of there and ensure Michelangelo the opportunity to get them out while they kind of defend the rear as they go for an escape. Because it's quite clear almost immediately that they can't win this battle. And we see the odds pretty soon. It's Leonardo, it's Casey Jones sitting side by side with insurmountable odds in their faces, doing what they were meant to do, right? Leonardo is the leader of the Turtles. Casey Jones is a member of the team. He and April are married at this time. He doesn't know that he's about to be a father. Even if he did, he would do the exact same thing, ensure her escape and the survival of her and his unborn child. I like the way they do this. I think it's done with style and grace. Maybe not quite as impactful as what they did with Raphael. His hot-headedness and his stubbornness got the best of him, and he went down swinging. And you got the slow-mo in the water, as you could see the life leave his body. We don't get quite that here, but we do get this really, really nice moment at the end. I'm certain at this point Leonardo and Casey Jones, despite having overcome overwhelming odds in the past, likely know that they're staring mortality in the face. And they're still friends. They're still having a conversation. This is Casey Jones. Your turn to buy pizza when we're through. Leonardo, yep, I picked the toppings, ham, pineapple, and jalapeno. What is wrong with you? Still like brothers till the end, standing side by side. After this, Baxter Stockman, I guess he detonates all the Mausers, I guess. I think they might be just, advanced Mausers, what they are. But they all are equipped with bombs. He detonates them. And that is the end of Leonardo and Casey Jones. Fugitoid is blown into pieces and later discovered by April O'Neil and some of her supporters after the fallout of this the decimation of the family, the final decimation in New York, where Oroku and the Foot Clan essentially take hold of New York and they've never given it back. April O'Neil is blasted out the door. They didn't quite make the escape. She lost an arm, she lost a leg, but she was saved. Michelangelo was blown even further away. Woke up, didn't know what happened. And we get this really good page. While not quite as emotional to me, Raphael is my favorite turtle. When we saw him kind of going down in the water, we do get this very symbolic image with Leonardo's katana and Casey Jones' signature mask kind of hanging there in the balance. That they've lost. The reader knows that they've lost two heroes that they've probably gone on a lot of journeys and a lot of adventures with. I like the way that it's done. You can sit here and when I got to this page, I just kind of looked at it. You got to have a moment with the characters and think about what just happened and what's been lost. So I think it was well done. The art is fantastic. It's tragic. You can see the sign for Bleecker Street. There's a lot of Easter eggs in this book as well. If you're a longtime TMNT fan that's been reading since the Mirage days, there's a lot of things to take in, not only from those comics, but the IDW comics and the movies as well. As I mentioned earlier, we've lost two heroes. This is the final fate of Leonardo and Casey Jones in this story. They went out heroes, defending their families. This fate is probably worthy of the characters. If they were going to die, they probably should go out trying to save their wife or trying to save their brother, or in defending others. So I felt the ending very much fit the characters. And that is the backup story. We will likely get more backup story, but this is the story of essentially the fall of the Turtles. All of this has been told through the eyes of Michelangelo and the eyes of April O'Neil. As far as we know, as soon as Donatello and Splinter leave, from the conversation that the two have together, they never ever see them again. And since we're only getting the flashback from their perspectives, unless another character comes in and witness their ultimate demise, it certainly leaves open the possibility that they could return. So let's get into some of the characterization after we saw the tragic loss of Leonardo and Casey Jones. We don't get a ton of new characterization as far as Oroku Hiroto. Well, we do see some interesting things, because the character that we're first introduced to at the beginning of the story and the character that we know in the current times, they appear to be two different people. I mean, it's the same person, but the mentality, something drastic has changed along the way, because as I mentioned, he's essentially given control of the Foot Clan in the beginning, and he says he wants peace. He wants to parlay for terms of peace with Splinter and the other houses that they're at war with. And he mentions that he takes his place as the head of the Foot Clan with great honor and humility. Later on in the current times, he declares martial law in New York City, telling the citizens that Michelangelo is out there, this mutant turtle is out there, and anyone that's found to be aiding, abetting Michelangelo and anyone that he's with, like, your punishment will be worse than his. So the mentality of this version of Oroku Hiroto is completely different than what we saw at the beginning. And then later, it's even reinforced. He's more crazy than we thought. And it almost appears like he's trying to prove that he's immortal. He jumps off of a building and some robot arms catch him, and he says, "I am a god, immortal. My angels will not allow it." And he's got this whole line of dialogue, and he's crazy. He is absolutely insane here. What drove him to be insane? I believe we have 5 more issues of this story. So that's 240 more pages of comic book to read. There's no way we've gotten all the flashbacks already. I anticipate moving forward, we're going to start getting some flashbacks from Hiroto's perspective and see what drove him insane. And perhaps when we start getting the story filled in from his perspective, we will actually see the loss of Splinter or Donatello, possibly both. But at this point, that is still a possibility. So this character is absolutely insane. But in the beginning, he's not. Something happened along the way, and I am curious to find out what that is. We also get a lot more of the story of April O'Neil filled in. Obviously, we talked about kind of what happened to her and how she was blown up and essentially the destruction of the Turtles' lair and their family. But April has not given up despite her injuries. And she believes that Fugitoid, Honeycutt, is the key to it all. He is the key to defeating the Foot Clan once and for all and essentially freeing them from the bondage of Oroku and the Foot Clan. And you see it through the art, her face is very weathered, but she never gave up hope. And she goes into the story of what happened to her. And these are the pages from Kevin Eastman where she's saying, she woke up missing an arm, missing a leg, and she was pregnant. She was in the hospital for a very long time, a ton of physical and mental therapy just to kind of get back on her feet. But she didn't rest on her laurels after that. She's been putting this together the entire time, waiting for an opportunity for her own vengeance, to get vengeance for her family, for the loss of her husband, for the loss of Casey Marie's father, for the loss of her brothers, the Turtles, for the assumed loss of Splinter as well. I really like the way they kind of filled in the blanks here. And then at the end, we get this really cool reveal that she's got this enormous armored vehicle that's she's been waiting, she's been restoring it, doing a bunch of things. She's been putting I wouldn't call them an army, but she's been putting a network together of people that are willing to fight with her for their freedom. And they're waiting for a sign, something to happen. Obviously, Michelangelo returning to New York City, in her mind, is that. But we also have the characterization that we've already got of Michelangelo, that he is the last Ronin. He wants to do this alone. He wants the vengeance for himself. He doesn't want anyone else to get hurt. He doesn't want April to get hurt. She doesn't want anyone in their network to get hurt. And he certainly doesn't want Casey Marie to get hurt. And I'm very anxious to see how they come together and Michelangelo decides to let his guard down, let himself be vulnerable again, and maybe let some other people help him because he's not ready for that. Earlier, I did mention that this is a lot of backstory, very little plot progression. But basically everything I've said about the comic is very positive. So why is this a 4-star instead of like a 4.5-star comic? Because there's a character in here named Casey Marie, and this could go very badly. It might have already gone badly. It all depends on what Eastman and Waltz bring to the story as far as where she goes from here. If you've been reading modern comics, if you've only been reading TMNT, maybe you haven't seen this as much. But one of the really lazy tropes and tools that comic writers are doing nowadays when they introduce a new character that they don't want to have to take the time with to develop the way that the Turtles, the way that Splinter, the way that April, Casey Jones, and other characters were developed over time, they use a character that you're familiar with, in this case, Michelangelo, to tell you how amazing they are. And this is what Michelangelo is saying to his brothers. Obviously, it's the memory of his brothers. It's like their spirits that are with him. Gotta admit, Casey Marie's pretty damn impressive. Book smart and street smart. And then another thing that writers will do nowadays that's really lazy, instead of going and developing a character, they'll have somebody say, look, this character is me. This character is exactly like me. You'll see it a lot of times if they want a younger character in the Marvel Universe. Spider-Man will be like, I see myself when I was 15 in that character, trying to get an easy shine rather than having to build up the character. So later, they're comparing Casey Marie to the brothers themselves. And Donatello says, apples to oranges, Mikey. We trained our entire lives. And she ain't a mutant, bro. She's just a kid, Casey and April's kid. And this is Michelangelo saying, look, she's just like us. And we were Splinter's kids. And Karai was Shredder's kid. And Hiroto's hers. And here we are back at square one. Listen, she's not a mutated turtle. Michelangelo and his brothers literally did train their entire lives to be ninjas. She's already stated multiple times that she doesn't know how to be a ninja, that she does need training. But trying to say that she's essentially Michelangelo and Raphael and the other turtles were at the beginning of like the Mirage series is a joke. It doesn't work because we already know that she isn't. And she's not a mutant. She's had a completely different life. The New York she's grown up in is completely different than the New York they grew up in. She has no healing factor comparable to what the brothers have. She has no power levels comparable to the brothers have. And she has no training comparable to what the brothers have. And she has no mentor comparable to what those brothers have. So this is stupid. Kevin Eastman and Tom Waltz should know better than to say this. Michelangelo has been the last Ronin for a very long time. He's not going to just come in and be Han Solo'd by Rey. Like, oh my goodness, she's just the tits. And then later on, just to show you how amazing that she is, even though she said she hasn't really had the training, she's never been a ninja or anything, she goes one-on-one with a robot Foot Clan soldier. We've already seen Michelangelo do well against these, but he also, it wasn't like he just ran over him the whole time. He had some harrowing moments, but she absolutely beats the piss out of him. She has a robot with a metal stick and blocks it with her regular human arm, and it somehow doesn't break. So they've introduced this character, and they're trying through Michelangelo to tell you how amazing she is, how she's just like the turtles always were, and when she fights somebody, she's the best at everything. She has a terrible personality. She keeps telling Michelangelo, who's lost his entire family to the Foot Clan, that she and her network of underground resistance fighters are going to be assisting Michelangelo, even though he said no. And you're like, I already told you, we don't need your permission. I think we got that line 2 or 3 times. Now, this could be all really good setup, except for the part where she beats the piss out of the one robot. That probably shouldn't have happened. Now, this could all be good setup and good kind of character progression if she's like this. And then when the meets the road, she fails. Michelangelo has to go save her, and maybe she learns that maybe I should listen to Michelangelo. Or maybe she's captured and fails, but along the way learns something about herself, frees herself, and ends up maybe saving him or something like that. But if this is just who the character is, this is terrible characterization and the laziest writing that you'll see. And it's so prevalent in modern comics nowadays that I don't see them not doing it the Rey in Star Wars. She's amazing at everything. I want her to be part of the Millennium Falcon. You should pilot my ship, kid. Why can't I adopt you? Kind of thing. I can already see that happening. So this could all be remedied in the future, and it could be the setup for some great story and character development later on. But I certainly doubt it. Just based on the current comic books that I've been reading lately. And that will do my review of TMNT: The Last Ronin number 3. Yes, there was a lot of stuff I probably couldn't cover in here. This review went longer than I wanted to, but if I try to cover everything, the review would probably never end because there is a lot of information. There are a lot of Easter eggs, lots of homages, lots of winks to longtime Turtle readers. I reviewed all 3 issues here on the channel. This is definitely worth your time. This is probably the best ongoing comic story that we're getting right now, regardless of publisher. It's definitely the best thing IDW's put out since To Kill Lock. It's a refreshing change of pace from the absolutely god-awful Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics that we're getting right now. So if you need something new, I know it's a little bit expensive, but it only comes out quarterly now, and maybe even longer. And it's definitely worth your time. Excellent series if you love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And they've left the door open, at least for now, that Donatello and Splinter are still out there, and they might be returning, hopefully before the end of the story.